All right, we are live. It is official. Midday news update. I'm excited to do something a little bit different. Got my better half over here, Mr. Half Dollar from Silver Doctors. Mr. Paul, how you doing this afternoon?
Doing good today, Mike. It's good to talk to you again. I think you're the better half. I'm the lesser half, so you know.
Okay, let's put it that we complement each other well. We both offer a variety of perspectives or whatnot. So I appreciate you taking time out of your day to join me for a little live stream here. And so wanted to give the audience something a little bit different. And there's a lot of things worthy of talking about, and we can't just be restricted to the time we put in on Silver Doctor. So I figure I would invite you here, let you share some of your thoughts, because you do a great job of analyzing and going deeper, a lot deeper than I go. So looking forward to getting your thoughts.
Yes, I appreciate that, because it's interesting because it's hard to keep up with everything because between the different time zones around the world, man, news is just going by so fast right now, Mike.
Yeah, I agree. And there's a couple of things I wanted to throw out there to you as well as to the audience. And we can also touch on any other subject matter in regards to what's going on to help better prepare, strategize, and maneuver in the days ahead, because I believe that February is going to be a heck of a month for many reasons. Mm-hmm. And so that being the case, I want to acknowledge a couple of people for taking time to join us. And so we got Glenn and Dexter Dave. We got that says, hi, Mike and Paul. Good to see both of you today. Is a treat. And we got Gary V says, no video today. I'm not sure what he was referring to. What else we got here? But first question I want to throw out there, I'm going to actually put it up so people can see the actual question itself once I remove a couple of things here. But the question I want to put out there is, when is the time to prepare for the coronavirus? And so the reason I want to put that out there is because I was listening to Chris Martinson's update, as he tends to put out a video every day, giving a heads up as to what's going on. And he mentioned a 2-week window. Mm-hmm. And so he was saying that, we have about 2 weeks before it really becomes some type of contagion event in the U.S. with all the cases is ramping up. And so, Mr. Halfdot, I want to get your thoughts on that. It is now a time to prepare, and what does preparation actually mean?
In the Army, it was just basically understood that, if you're thirsty, you're already dehydrated, right? Yeah. Or when is the best time to study for a test? Well, if you've been studying all along, you don't need to study for a test, right? So when is the best time to prepare? That was months ago. That was years ago. That was weeks ago. That was days ago. Now everybody's just going to be playing catch up. So any effort is better than no effort at all. So definitely, probably preaching to the choir here, but people need to be getting prepared for this in more ways than just one, because it's talking about, all of the different levels of prepping, right? Your food supply, your water supply, making sure you got an emergency fund, making sure you got some protective gear, all of this type of stuff. But definitely the sooner the better.
Yeah. Now, okay, here's another question to throw out there. And so as always, I'm learning, we're getting a chance to really experience a possible real world case scenario of what it's like to have some type of health scare that can turn ugly, that can get ugly quick. And so that's what it appears to be. So I haven't quite settled in with the fact that I'm like fearful or scared or nervous or whatever. So I don't know, but I'm learning on the fly. So when it comes to preparation, okay, you have the food, you have the water. And so I've actually seen people out there talking about getting certain types of masks or whatnot. So I actually Googled, masks and things like that, just to better understand what it means to actually put some protective gear on physically. What are your thoughts on that? Have you actually looked into that, or think that's something we need to consider?
Definitely the close contact. And now there's starting to be some things about inanimate objects. So yeah, all of those things, I'm not prepared to be walking around with a mask in public just yet myself. Mm-hmm. I do think the risk is pretty low kind of right now. Although kind of close to us, and Toronto was one of the cases, and then a couple in Chicago now. So it's not like this is something that's unavoidable, but I kind of want to take that question a different direction and just give an update on a couple developments. Yesterday we were talking about an email that I got, and it was saying, something's fishy here because, they have to send all the different states have to send in the samples to the CDC to get tested. Mm-hmm. And yesterday in the CDC's teleconference, they were talking about that. So that is actually true. The way that this goes on is only the CDC is able to test for this Wuhan coronavirus. Because one of the things they were talking about is they want to develop this test kit that other health departments can use on their own instead of sending it into the CDC. Mm-hmm. And then I've been looking at this tracker on the CDC every day now since, quite frankly, we started talking about it on the 20th of January. And one of the things that's interesting is it shows, and let me give you the link here, and this is the map, but, this is a running total. And one of the things that it shows is, ever since they started looking at the novel coronavirus, the Wuhan coronavirus, so far to date, all that they have done is collected 260 samples for testing. 260. That's it. They've only tested 167 of them. So 82 of them are still in, not even tested yet. So think about that, right? This has been going on for weeks now, weeks. And supposedly the premier authority of public health in the world, one of them at least, the CDC, you would think that they've only tested 260 people out of everybody. I mean, so what this is getting me thinking of is I'm thinking of stuff like Florida, right? Because my dad and my stepmom live in Florida, and I'm thinking about tourist attractions and Orlando and Miami and the number of tourists that fly in there. If Disney was, closed in Shanghai, which it was, is it possible that some people decided to spend their Lunar New Year celebration in Disney World in Orlando, Florida? What happens once some elderly in Florida get infected with this? I mean, this thing has the potential to explode rapidly. And that's one of the things that I'm going to be looking at, just as kind of to tip me off that, hey, it's starting to get bad, is if there's a case in Florida, that's watch out there, because there's a disproportionate, larger percentage of elderly in Florida who are more immunocompromised, generally speaking, than people of healthy, able bodies. Yeah. Any thoughts on that, Mike?
Yeah. So as this thing spreads more, the testing is questionable. And so if the CDC is the only one that's capable now of testing it, as I mentioned, I think the other day, last week, is that the information that's coming out is that they're behind the curve on actually being able to actually accurately test for those that are contaminated, infected, whatever, because of that long window of time between the symptoms showing up and it being dormant. So once again, okay, if you are tested, then I don't think there's no vaccine, there's nothing to treat it. And so do you treat it like a common flu? Do you treat it? I mean, you mentioned yesterday about just staying hydrated and all that stuff like that, and basically giving them flu type of responses for a damn virus that's, life-threatening. Mm-hmm. And then once you do have it, what's the, okay, what do you get? Elevated fever, and what's some of the symptoms when you do have it that becomes problematic to your health, to where, you're borderline, on the verge of death itself. So those are all things I question heavily.
Yeah. And, fever, that's one of them. And then the other thing, because the fever could kill you, right? Because the whole purpose of a fever is to kill the virus, to heat your body up to a temperature high enough to kill the virus. So fever is good in one sense, but it's bad in the other sense. Mm-hmm. It's a delicate balance. And then, one of the things the CDC was talking about yesterday is false negatives. And this goes back to my time on the HIV hotline, where what the test does is, you see, they've isolated the virus, so they know what the virus looks like. So what the test does, generally speaking, and I'm pretty sure this is the same for this coronavirus too, is they're looking for antibodies. So what the antibodies is your own body's immune response to the virus itself. So they're going to be looking for these antibodies. And the risk with false negatives is that a person could be infected with this, but they might not have enough immune response to have antibodies in sufficient quantities to even register on the test anyway. So, there's also risk for false negatives out there. I mean, this is a major public. This is going to be a mess. It's definitely going to be a mess. And I want to talk about the market impacts and stuff like that, because some interesting stuff just came out today again. And you were spot on yesterday, Mike, when you were like, they're going to ramp the stock market. That sucker shot straight up 490 points today.
Oh, my goodness. And so I came across an article I actually pull up on the screen now myself, where it was very favorable, because it says the Dow rises. And so it looks like people are willing to bet along. I mean, one of my things is who's so concerned with investing right now? Would you really be so concerned with investing and taking advantage of all of this? And so it says Dow rises sharply as investors bet on economic resilience. And so I'm thinking okay, really? So Mr. Half Dollar, did you go out and purchase some stocks today? Did you buy the dip from Friday?
No, I did not buy the dip. I did not place one trade at all last year, and I don't have $1 in the stock market.
Oh,
you
my
know,
goodness.
Last week we were talking about Wilbur Ross. And for people who don't know, Wilbur Ross is a Trump administration official. He is the Secretary of Commerce in the United States. Do you remember that last week he said that in conjunction with the USMCA and the Phase 1 trade deal, that this year 600,000 jobs will be added to the United States economy. And on top of that, this coronavirus is going to accelerate the return of jobs to the United States. Well, just this morning, Larry Kudlow was on with the same interviewer, that Maria, whatever her name is, Baratomo or whatever. She was asking him questions. So here's what he said today. This morning he said, and he was talking about the Wuhan coronavirus. And he's like basically talking about, well, it's not really going to be that big of a deal in the economy. At most, I'm looking for a 0.2, right? A 0.2% hit to GDP in the first quarter and possibly in the second quarter, but it's not really going to go on between 5 or 6 months. And he said, nothing is going to change from the fact that we have a blue-collar booming economy. Nothing's going to change that fact, Mike. So it's like, it's just roses and unicorns and rainbows as far as that can be, even in the midst of a global economic pandemic, who knows what, so.
Right. Like, so where's all this false optimism coming from, apart from the fact that they have to get out there and give you some good news, even in the midst of bad? Because if they were to be truthful, the markets would tank, and then there will be more of a panic that would ensue. Financial markets will be impacted on top of people being concerned with their health. That's all in the mix, man. Like, how can economic slowdown led by China right now not impact the U.S.? Because the trade situation, all the trade deal, we talked about stuff yesterday, all that stuff is on the verge of being reneged upon. So how can that not slow things down would be my question. So
yes, to think that this is not going to have an impact, I mean, it's going to have a massive impact all the way around. And I watched Chris Martinson's latest video update too, and he's one of the best people to watch about this for following this stuff and getting the most current information. But he pointed out a very interesting point too. He didn't point out the cumulative totals on the CDC like I did, but he was pointing out the fact that there's not one case in Africa. There's not, I don't think there was Africa, but not one case in Mexico or in anywhere in Latin America. How is it possible that there's not one single case in anywhere of Latin America, Mike?
Now watch this. And so I'm not surprised, because when I was in Colombia, you were asking what was the vibe like down there, and apart from not having time to really look into it, I wouldn't be surprised if there's not anything on the mainstream news about be on the lookout, or even the governments there being concerned with people from Asia coming into their country. And so could this pandemic actually be a steered event towards the developed nations to really bring down the governments, or bring down, or orchestrate a global government cooperation agreement, as I mentioned before, to get everybody on the same page of getting us all vaccinated? And what's in the vaccines, only they know.
Oh, yes. And because you had brought that up yesterday, and actually everybody needs to go watch yesterday's Ron Paul Liberty Report, because we were talking about what's going to be in that vaccine and what happens if you don't take it. And he gave a very specific example from back during the Ford administration when he was in Congress. And I can't remember what the health pandemic was, but they rushed a vaccine through and they got it created with months, and like 500 people were paralyzed from it. And they had to stop it just months into the program because it was completely rushed and it was botched and it was an absolute disaster. And the government tried to say everybody had to get this vaccine. So
a rush job. So okay, just the fact that we're going to be encouraged or heavily steered towards taking one, it's going to be one of the things where it's optional, but it's not optional, because if a lot of people opt out of just sheerly questioning how valid is it, has it been tested, and all the things you just mentioned, it's going to paint the alternative media people, if we talk about this as like we're risk to the health of the economy, the government, we could be considered a national security threat, borderline. I wouldn't want to go this far, but say terrorists type of thing. Like we're fighting back or resisting. You know how they can spin this thing off, and that's very spooky, because I don't want to be a test dummy. And here's another thing I want to throw out there for everybody that's tuning in, for all my parents out there. So half dollar, you're a parent, I'm a parent. At what point do we consider possibly removing our kids from the school sector? Like, hey, they say y'all stay home today. We got to really would it be a situation where there's a case in your city, or in the school district, or, you know, as a parent, this is my parents out there, what point would you look to make a move as far as like, hey, you know, your kids stay home, you may not go into work that day, or what type of preparation?
Yeah, and that's a big one. And then are they going to let the kids into school? Because that's another way to force those vaccines. Because are they going to require it? Because we don't do the vaccine thing unless it's absolutely required. Because some of them it's just too hard to get away from. And I'm already on enough lists anyway. I don't need to be on another list for being a terrible parent and not getting my kids vaccinated. So they get whatever is just absolutely bare minimum necessary just to get them in school. But you bring up an interesting point because, you know, one of the reasons we moved over the summer was to move into one of the top 5 school districts in the state. And I'm just seeing the same old crappy education that I see anywhere else. And, you know, my kids have been in school in North Carolina. They've been in Texas. You know, they've been in school districts all over the country. My daughter's been in 5 different schools in the last 5 years, which is why I wanted to move to provide some sort of stability there. But the point is, it's just the same lousy education anywhere. So in addition to just pulling them out for a virus scare, you know, I might even take that one step further because it's just total indoctrination and brainwashing centers at this point.
Yeah, I agree. And especially, you know, I'm big on, you know, the other channel, the Giftpreneurs. I'm really big on encouraging people to think beyond the mainstream narrative. And it has a lot to do with the watered down, dumbed down educational curriculum, that it's the same overall general information that we received 20, 30 years ago. And so apart from it just being some new bells and whistles, really, you know, it's doing our kids a disservice. And as a parent, I've already been frustrated with it. So I try to be more hands-on with my children and give them a different way of looking at things. And so it's one of them things where I personally am all fine and well with pulling my youngest, especially, out of middle school and saying, hey, let's just work on this at home. We can experiment together. We'll probably get just as good results as me sending you somewhere to sit around in these classrooms being indoctrinated with crap. So that's going to be something worthwhile.
Yeah, I want to bring something up here real quick, Mike.
Yeah, please do.
You know, because I get a lot of slack for this, and, you know, this has caused a lot of problems over at Silver Doctors because, well, it's just my own opinion, right? I think President Trump is deep state globalist. I think he's a globalist, deep stater, and Patriots clothing. And today there's more evidence of that. So this is a Trump tweet that I just sent you.
All right, let me put it up.
And I just want to go over the context here. So my approval rating in the Republican Party, 95%. Big Iowa win. This is from this morning. Approval rating overall, 53%, a new high. With our great economy and other major successes, would be 20 points higher without the phony witch hunts and the hoaxes. So I guess I got to send you this one too, right? Because this is the standard fallback.
Okay.
So here's the next one. So we have to go back to this tweet, right? So here he's talking about the witch hunts again. So he's putting it in the context that if there wasn't the witch hunts, his approval rating would be 20 points higher. He also said for many years that the witch hunt was destroying lives, was devastating lives. And then he also said in that tweet right there that I had the right to end the whole witch hunt if I wanted to, right? So this is the one that we fall back on.
Yeah.
People get mad at me if I talk about this, but I just have to say it because he talked about it again today. So my point is this, right? You know, wouldn't it be in his interest to end it if he wants a higher rating in the polls? Do you see what I'm saying? That's kind of like if your job performance, if you're like about to get a raise in your job and it was based on your performance, but all the people around you kept sabotaging your performance, they kept breaking the stuff that you're making on the manufacturing line and look like you're doing a terrible job. Wouldn't you want to address that so you could get that raise at the end of the year when you get your performance review? So this makes no sense whatsoever because he says that he could end the witch hunt if he wanted to, right? So why does it continue? Because our government refuses to go after the actual real systemic corruption and fraud that we have in Washington and just focus on the circus sideshow. But I had to throw that out since it was fresh from today, the first week.
So here's the thing. So how do you actually go about ending it? That would be the question. Like, what is his methodology to end it? And so a lot of people would say that, you know, those the sealed indictments and, like, you know, showing all the bad actors that's been in politics forever. So is that his way of saying that he could bring this to an end or what? Because outside of using some type of executive order, which he's known to do, you know, how would he actually end it would be the biggest question. And so what do you mean, Mr. President? Like, can you elaborate a little bit more for us?
Yeah, or else it was a lie. So it's either one of those two, or else it's a lie, and he couldn't have ended it. But yeah, that's funny that you bring up the sealed indictments, because we haven't heard a word about that in a long time.
I'm thinking people are believing that he's going to save that as his grand finale on the way out in his second term. And so based upon this virus situation and all this political impeachment stuff, I really one thing that does have me concerned is the fact that we're only in the first week of the second month out of 12. And if we're already starting off with so much questionable activity, where this health situation will run through February, really take up even more of the mainstream media, hell, like what's next week gonna look like? What's next month gonna look like? Nevertheless, actually, when it's time to get out and start voting for the president. And I didn't even have a chance to watch that whole caucus thing in Iowa, but yet I heard all types of commentary from it, heard it was a sham, and Democrats are really shooting themselves in the foot. I heard Joe Biden flip-flop so many times, and it's a complete chaos, it sounds like, from the Democratic side. And I don't know anything about what's happening on the Republican side. Is there even any candidates out there trying to attempt to run against Trump, or what?
I don't know. I haven't been following that much. And as far as the Iowa caucus, I know it was a disaster, but I don't know the exact details about it. But that's another interesting point, right? Because the words rigged elections are coming up again. The caucus was rigged. And Chris Martin's also really good with that, right? Because he's really good with data. But he's explained like 10 different ways from Sunday of how our election system in the United States is just totally rigged and fraudulent. Yeah. So, it is interesting because, it's all over the news, but all it is they're just, it's such a debacle. It's like, that's the most important thing to focus on, is just this debacle. And there's so many other things going on. It's amazing.
Yeah. Now I want to actually throw out that next question. So the first question was a preparation. And so you mentioned about, we should have already been preparing. And so I want to actually dive further in the days ahead as to some things that I personally will start doing even more when it comes to those masks and things like that. Because once again, I think right now we don't know the full extent of whatever this virus really is, because as you said yesterday, the CDC don't know anything, and they're claiming to have control over some things, but they don't. But here's another question: who would invest heavily during a global pandemic? So right now, if people are actually out there, as our Arquar showed, the Dow is up, and people are, really want to hang on there and bet in this current environment. What are some, in your opinion, outside of Meadows and things of that nature, is there anything else that would be worthy of a alternative-minded individual considering at this current moment as an investment or hedge or preparation tool?
Well, possibly. I'm probably going to get this wrong, but, I bought a little bit of extra RAM and a little bit of extra computer processors over the weekend. So that's kind of like alternative, because, that's one of the things that I look out a lot with my, I'm like an amateur computer hobbyist, builder, repairer, and more than anything, just breaking computers and thinking that I can fix them. But, and so this is like something that I'm actually actively doing, because, I remember over Black Friday, I got RAM on sale for, I got 8 gig sticks for $20 a pop. I got 32 gigs of RAM for $80. And now 16 gigs of RAM just all day long is like $55 at least on a 2 gigabyte kit. So, the supply chain thing, I think that it is in fact real. And I think that it is something that we're going to see more and more, especially as the time goes on, because if we truly have a just-in-time inventory system, then just as an alternative investor, as a way to kind of play this, and there's really nothing wrong with playing it, right? I mean, there's nothing wrong with trying to, have an edge on somebody and realizing something that might be a potential opportunity for an investment or even a short-term type of trade. So, that's what I'm looking at, just like real things. And then that's just my focus anyway, is just investing in something that's real, right? Yeah. So like in my case, it's because I know the RAM and I know the processors and I know, computers. That's what I know. So I guess the point is, don't go out doing something that you don't know about, right? Don't go investing in some REIT next to some, hotel that can house, quarantine people next to some hospital for this thing like that. If you don't know anything about REITs, you don't need to be messing with REITs in time like this, so you got to stick with what you know.
Yeah. So, of course, for me, I'm thinking like, on the health side, given the fact that this situation will more than likely escalate, and just some common practical things that I feel that could be a start. Like, it's one of the things I'm learning on the fly, but yet my physical health right now is something that I'm going to consider investing in a little bit more. because it's one of the things where you can have all the tools, gadgets, and money and all the gold coin, all that stuff. But yet, if your health isn't in order, then you're not going to really be able to benefit and enjoy all that other stuff. And so I heard a lot of people talk about colloidal silver. And so I've taken some of those drops before, but knowing that silver, or just the periodic table itself, is the human body is comprised of all the periodic elements in some form or fashion. So colloidal silver, droplets or whatever, I'm going to start taking those again. I've been off of those for a while, staying up on my vitamins and whatnot. And then, of course, I've been slacking on exercise because I've been more focused on video so much. I'm like, let me get out here and get my cardio up just a little bit. And I'm going to start drinking more higher pH water, because I believe that keeping your alkaline up or whatnot can definitely help stave off infections and whatever. So those are some practical things I'm going to implement. So as soon as I get done, I'm running to the health store and I'm going to load up so my kids can stay, get their health on, and even more so. So yeah, outside of that, yeah, metals. I saw that metals took a little dip yesterday. It went down to 1601, then it shot right back up. What was up with that? I didn't mean to cut you off. What were you going to say outside of that?
At 1601?
I saw, yes, I looked at a chart. I'm looking at something right now, and silver at yesterday at 9 a.m. at 9:15 it was 1779, and then at 9:45 it was 1601 spot price, and then at 10 o'clock it was at 1767. So there's a dip.
Yeah, that was definitely, because that didn't show up on my chart. So that's one of those weird flukes. Is that off of a Kitco chart?
No, it is off gold and silver.
Because Kitco charts, Kitco charts are the most notorious for having those weird kind of flukes. But I don't see that on my chart, and I'm looking at it right now. That's why it kind of like caught me off guard when you said that. 1750 is holding pretty nicely here. 1750 has been holding this whole time. 1550 has been holding in gold. 1525 has been holding in gold very nicely too. But I want to go one step back, one more second. Just in general, as far as the mainstream, when we were also talking about investments, other things that could come out of this pandemic is, like things you would want to avoid, right, are going to be things that are like entertainment based and things that are like social gathering entertainment based, because there can be an impact there, because it could be a double whammy, especially if it's a social gathering type of place, because if people aren't going to be gathering in public, that's a hit. And then two, in a recession, well, if it's entertainment anyway, discretionary income is one of the first things that you start cutting to tighten up that belt a little bit. That's one. And then two, think about this too. People are going to be less leery to be like shopping in person and more apt to actually buy stuff online possibly and just have it delivered and arrive on their doorstep and not interact with a human. That's something that's interesting. In addition to the pharmaceuticals, unfortunately, your vaccine companies and this and that. But those are just a couple of wrap up there for the investing, although that's not really alternative. That's just in general.
Yeah, and so Troxel, one of the viewers mentioned about, some recommended. He said C60, liposomal, vitamin C, and garlic, and a good D3 gel cap. And so we got some people out there chiming in with some practical health things that you can probably consume that can help. And so before we get ready to wrap up, this live stream is going to be just a quick 30-minute segment. I wanted to ask, is there any questions or any other topics out there that people might want us to touch on briefly? And so if you are, feel free to let us know in the chat and we can definitely touch on it. But like always, there's going to be more news to talk about. And so I just wanted to throw out that subject matter on the virus. Like, as a parent, how do you begin making preparation for your children in school? And that remember I talked about, with this virus, it's going to be something that people will self-quarantine themselves. And as you just hinted at, removing yourself out of environments where you run the risk of being around people and things like that will come into play. And then also on the cutting back side, I personally myself have, especially the last couple of weeks, especially since the start of this new year, have not really been concerned with consuming all types of things that aren't necessary. Like, apart from just, your practically your food, you're paying your bills, whatever. I'm like, I would like to free up more discretionary capital to put towards things that, I see being asset hedges or preserving capital down the line. So I'm definitely going to cut back on my spending on things that I really don't need. Like at this point, I'm just focused on educating people and trying to brace and prepare for whatever's coming ahead. So I'm not really concerned with all this other stuff, like even like going to the movies. I thought about going to the movies this past weekend. I'm like, you know what? That's 2 hours of my life wasted. I'm like, I'm scared. I'm not going.
Yeah, Mike, I got a limit of a movie a quarter, but I made it through all of 2019 with two movies. And one of them was Us. And I actually kind of like that movie only because of the subliminal CIA, propaganda that was going on in it. And I don't even remember what the second movie was. So I don't even remember the second movie that I watched, but that's a good idea, right? I mean, it's like, because I don't know about you, but when we go to the movies, I mean, it's like, at least, I mean, I'm trying to think here, but I think I would be like $60 or maybe it's $80 for my family and four to go to the movies. Because once you add in the popcorn and the drinks, because, my wife will sneak something in her purse, but my kids aren't having any of that. They want to stand in line and actually buy the stuff. And it's like, my goodness.
They wait till we get to the movie theater and say, Dad, can I go get? I'm like, so we just
we went out to eat at a restaurant before we went to the movies, and now you're getting popcorn 30 minutes later. It's like, oh no.
It's just idea of spending mommy and daddy's money. But we do got a question from Tony Blaylock. It says, is China devaluing its currency? And so I mentioned from the article on Sunday where the yuan dropped at a little bit above 7-1. And so I don't know if they're actually devaluing it or rather than not concentrating on keeping it, relatively stable in the midst of all their QE over there. So I think they might just be letting it float a little bit. And so I don't know, but Mr. Halfdollar, have you touched on that or even know anything about that?
Not a whole lot. I mean, it's been like to either side of 7 for the better part of the last year. There was a lot of talk about the currency manipulation, but that's kind of died down a little bit since we unlabeled them a currency manipulator now, which will be interesting to see if we label them a currency manipulator again, if they start backing off of the trade deal that we don't even know the details about anyway. But, it's interesting because China's pumping money into their stock markets now too. So, it's like that's one of the things that frustrates me because like in the gold bugs and silver bugs and the gold community and the silver community, everybody's, I don't know about everybody, but there had been for years this hope that China's going to be the one to bring sound money back to the world economy. But they're showing the opposite. They're just showing that they're just going to pump money like every other cheap central bank pumping money into their financial sector,
Yeah, I think, and also their accumulation of metals for the last decade plus, which started like after the .com crash, I think has more so to do with preparation for the day that nobody will accept Federal Reserve notes. So I think they'll be willing to bring as much QE into existence as possible if they plan on being able to say, hey, now let's go to our vaults now and see what the real price would be according to yuan as opposed to dollars. Because if you were to like try to come up with a dollar figure for every ounce of above ground gold, if we could find out, of course, it'd be 40, 50, 60, 70, whatever thousand, whatever that would be in total in dollars to gold. But yet in yuan to gold, depending on how much gold they have, it could be around that same figure, of which they are probably more than willing to place that bet because they got the gold to back it up more than likely. So that's kind of my thought process on them transitioning to that next world order. So
so it's like they'll be prepared for it, but I guess my point was they'll be prepared for it, but they're not necessarily going to lead to it. They're just going to, once it's there, they got the card up, they got that ace up their sleeve.
Right.
That's even the right metaphor.
I agree. So I guess with that getting case, we are at 30 minutes. I want to be respectful of your time. It's $50. And so we're going to dial back. But I just want to check in and do something a little different. Have Mr. $50 join me on RTD to give a great perspective. And so more relaxed, more free flow over here. We just to have some fun over here, man. We got to smile over here, dog. I can't do the doom and gloom on this channel no more. So I'm down with that.
And it'll be good because I got to, have a better outlook on things anyway, because I tend to lean more doom and gloomy. So hopefully I'll tend to lean more optimistic here now.
Yeah. Okay. So last thought here. So we got Glenn says, Chris Martinson has recently recommended elderberry syrup for immune support. I would also add oil of garlic and oregano oil capsules along with eating lots of fruits and veggies. So Glenn, appreciate you for sharing that, my friend. And so with that being the case, we're going to dial back, and I appreciate everybody taking time to join us. And so other than that, we'll be back. If you guys want to check out some more action, we'll be tomorrow at Silver Doctors, 11 o'clock. We'll be there. But then other than that, try to bring Mr. $50 on to the RTD, help out on this side, because I appreciate him, his commentary. So Paul, thanks for joining, my friend. Enjoy the rest of your day, and we'll get back with you guys later. Peace.